Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk Wilkinson. Think of me as your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and navigating a sea of toxicity, sharing stories from my path and using the power of conversation and collaboration with great guests. Together, we chart a course toward understanding, bridging divides, and fostering a community where wisdom prevails over discord. Friends, it's all about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. No two journeys are identical, but my journey began with gratitude and personal accountability. The only good thing about a bad attitude is we have the ability as individuals to change it. At the DTH podcast, we strive to provide you the tools to do just that. I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Friends, please remember to subscribe and share the DTH podcast with your network of friends. And with that, let's get to it. Friends, it is not always about what we say, but how we say it. And then we have to consider how others perceive it. And then, of course, there's always those times when what we want to say is probably better left unsaid. This is just but a small part of what Daniel Darling and I are talking about this week. If you aren't familiar with Daniel Darling is an author, pastor, and Christian thought leader. He's also a podcaster. He currently serves as the director of the Land Center for Cultural Engagement at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary and professor of faith and culture at Texas Baptist College. Prior to his leadership of the Land Center, Darling served as the senior vice president for communications of the National Religious Broadcasters. He also has served the Southern Baptist Convention as the vice president of communications at the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. Daniel is a best-selling author of several books, including The Original Jesus, The Dignity Revolution, The Characters of Christmas, The Characters of Easter, A Way with Words, and his latest book, which is one of the reasons I've asked him to come speak with me on the DTH podcast, is Agents of Grace, How to Bridge Divides and Love as Jesus Loves. Friends, do not miss this incredible conversation with my new friend, Daniel Darling. And with that, here we go. Daniel Darling, thank you for joining me on the D-Rate the Hate podcast. So good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, man. And glad to be on here. Glad we're finally able to make it work.
Yeah. I know we had some schedule conflicts there a couple times when we had some original meetings set up, but it is all good because the missions that both you and I are on are evergreen, and I'm sure it's well worth the wait. So Dan, let's first start. The one thing, obviously, what I do here on the D-Rate the Hate podcast, I'm always looking for thought leaders and people who are bettering the world in some way. And when I saw your book, Agents of Grace, How to Bridge Divides and Love as Jesus Loved, and then started looking into your background and the different things that you've written and the different things that you've done. I'm like, now here's somebody I definitely want to talk to, because obviously bridging the divide is something that I've taken a great passion to myself. Doing the work that I do with Braver Angels and just seeing polarization and this divide as one of our greatest struggles. So talk to me first, Dan, about this book of yours, Agents of Grace, How to Bridge Divides and Love as Jesus Loved.
Well, I wrote it for a few reasons. I think number one, it's no secret that the last few years, there's been a lot of division in the country. And even, I'm writing in many ways to my own people, evangelical Christians or people of faith, Christian folks. And even among Christians, there's a lot of division. You probably see it yourself. We're in a disruptive time with we've had a worldwide pandemic. We've had the digital revolution where everyone can have a voice, which is good, but then also everyone has a voice, which can be bad.
Can get ugly.
Yeah. And we've had racial tension, We've had all these things, tumultuous things, and people are nervous, they're fearful. There's a lot of division in the country. And so my goal was to say, well, how can Christians really model what it looks like to bridge divides? And that doesn't mean that we all agree. And there's going to be deep differences. It doesn't mean there aren't things that we should fight for. There's definitely things worth fighting for, and positions to take, and taking a stand on different things. So I wrote in part because of that, because it's just really my heart to say, how can we bring people together in that way? The second reason is, I've wanted to talk a little bit about my own life and my own experience, growing up in the church. And a lot of people are writing books today about growing up in the church and sort of rejecting that, and how they were hurt by Christians and all that. And I hear some of those, but there's a lot of cynicism about the church. There's a lot of cynicism about evangelical Christians out there. And I wanted to write and say, I'm an evangelical Christian. I've been one my whole life, and I still am very hopeful about our movement. I'm hopeful about the church and about Christians. And if you look beyond the headlines and beyond some of the nastiness, and you just look at real people and real communities, you see a lot of good happening that Christians are doing around the world. And so there's a little bit of that as well.
Yeah. And I want to get into that a little bit, Dan, because I think we as Christians do quite often get a bad rap, and just like any bucket that people are placed in, we often find that the critics will find the worst of
Mm-hmm.
the worst examples of those in that bucket. I mean, I don't like the fact that we're placed in boxes and then have these labels put on us and things like that, because I do believe strongly in the individual, and that, while Christianity is part of my identity, it is not my whole identity. Just like, conservatism is part of my identity, but
Mm-hmm.
not my whole identity. And
Right.
one of the things that we see today that bugs me so much, Dan, is that as Christians, the cynics of Christians will look at the worst of us. And there are
Yeah.
bad people in every group. There are
Yes.
bad things that every group or people in every group does. And if we just focus on those examples and then tie that one event or that one bad apple to that whole group, which is what we see a lot today, it makes for a very, very ugly thing. And now in this, I, I don't like the word and I think it's way overused, but in the world of woke that we live in today, right? That is
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that happens so often, and it's so terrible. Is this I that's a word that I've been using a lot lately, and identitarianism.
Mm-hmm.
If you tie the worst of a particular group to everybody in that group, and they've made that their main focus, their main identity, now everybody in that group is described as that bad apple. And I don't like that. So talk a little bit about that for me, Dan.
You're exactly right. And it's funny. I went on Morning Joe a couple months ago, and I know Joe, and I was on there talking about the evangelical movement. And I said, look, most evangelical Christians are not thinking about politics. They're trying to get their kids to school. They're going to church. They're maybe helping out with Vacation Bible School things. Yeah, they vote conservatively because they have certain values and things, which makes sense. But they're not thinking all day about it. And every group has what I call crazy uncles, right? Has a
Mm-hmm,
percentage of people that are crazy uncles. Um, we have folks, every group does. And Joe was saying, no, that's not the minority, it's the majority. And I just think there's a narrative out there that evangelical Christians are, every single one of them is a sort of frothing at the mouth politico that's ready to take over and all that kind of stuff. It's just not true. And I think it really, the way we think about people should be, as you said, more than just their decisions, right? So I'm a conservative. I'm a political conservative. Have been my whole life. That's not all I am.
mm-hmm,
People,
mm-hmm. That's right.
and as a Christian, we believe people are made in the image of God. They're whole people. People are complicated. Just like I have friends who I disagree with politically, but that's not all they are. If you just reduce them down to just their political opinion, or that, as you said, their subgroup or their racial category. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do think um, this ideology, whatever you want to call it, successor ideology or identitarianism, that puts people in these fixed categories, is really, I think, toxic. The idea that, well, if you are this skin color, you are always and forever an oppressor. And if you are in this group, you're always the oppressed and you have a blank check, do whatever you want. And I do think there are at times people who oppress and people who are oppressed, but that they're fixed categories based on, your race or your ethnicity is really toxic. And it
Very,
prevents us
very
from coming
toxic.
together and seeing people as whole people and seeing people at more than just, the vote they made or the opinion they have over here, that they're whole people. I mean, one thing why this happens, Will, I think, is a lot of our conversations are mediated through digital mediums. And so we just see that person with that tweet or that thing up on the screen.
That's right.
Or on our phone. And that's all we think about. And think, how could they say this? These people are crazy, but they're more than that. And same with us. We don't want to be I would not want to be reduced down to my worst moment or my worst idea or my worst opinion. And I don't think we should do that to other people. And so I do love the work that you're doing on your podcast and with Braver Angels, just to say, hey, well, let's come together. Doesn't mean we're all going to agree. In fact, we're probably going to disagree. But can we do this in a way that is, yeah, we have to. Can we do this in a way that is civil and dignified and respects the dignity of the person we're talking to? And maybe we learn something from someone in these conversations.
The conversation is the most important thing. If we all agree, I mean, if we all agree in everything that we do, and nobody ever tries to think outside the box, or nobody has the courage to speak up and fearlessly say, I do not agree with what's going on here, or I do not agree with this this track that we're on, we do not get the best ideas. We do not accomplish anything. We do not grow as human beings. I mean, let's face it. We as a human race have had to adapt and move forward. For thousands of years, right? And the only way we did that is through out of the box thinking, through people not agreeing with, well, we've always done it this way, so we always have to do it this way.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I found too, Wilk, that, I'm a Christian, I'm a conservative. I've been a conservative. I'm conservative politically and theologically, and I have been for my whole life. I'm a Reagan conservative, social conservative on life and marriage and those things, and economic conservative for the most part, free markets and capitalism, and foreign policy, peace through strength. I've been that my whole life. But what I found is when I interact with people who disagree with me, whether it's people on the right who might disagree with me or people on the left, sometimes I learn something and say, they have a point here or here. Other times I realize, interacting with someone who disagrees with me sharpens my own opinions.
Absolutely.
And sharpens my own ideas and helps me think through them, not just in a sort of, an easy way, but help to think through them in terms of, okay, this is actually why I believe this, because I'm contrasting with this. And so, and I think we can be, and this is something that I think you've done really well, and Braver Angels tries to do well. We can be very set in our convictions and have strong opinions and convictions, which I do, and yet also zoom out a little bit and say, we all have to live side by side in our communities and our country. And if we don't care about our democracy and care about keeping our country together, it doesn't matter what opinion I'm going to have. You right? If we can't hold this thing together. So, my neighbors, I'm not sure what their politics are, or even what their religion is. I wish all my neighbors believe the way I do, but I still have to live side by side with them in a community.
That's right.
And so at some level, at the human level, we should say, we want to preserve this thing that we have as a country and a community.
Well, and it's something that, and I'm glad you brought that up, the neighbors thing, Dan, because that's one of these things that I continuously talk about is shut off the news, get off social media, get into the driveway and drink cold beers with your neighbor, right? Have those conversations with your neighbor. Really get out amongst your community, not this illusion of a community that people live in now in this internet ecosystem, but their real community. Engage with your neighbors, engage with people around you. Face to face, real life interaction is what's going to bring us together. One of the biggest things that bothers me these days, and I know you just kind of alluded to it there, but when people reduce an individual to their worst moments, that one tweet where they used poor wording to express an opinion or something like that, and now that is the one thing that goes viral. I went through the book The Constitution of Knowledge, and then developed a friendship with Jonathan Rauch, and he talks a lot in there and gives some examples of how people's worst moments went viral, and he there was a specific example of a gal that said something that was a horrible thing that she said, but in the time that she flew from the United States to like South Africa or something like that, in that 11-hour period of time, this tweet that she put out, and nobody knew who she was before, but by the time she landed in South Africa, that she millions of people knew who she was, and this one thing, her whole life had been reduced to this one tweet, and I mean, she lost her job, she lost almost everything she had, it had to basically go into hiding. That kind of thing is so ugly. I think about this internet ecosystem we have, and I do often give it a bad rap. I call it this dumpster fire of hate, lies, and misinformation. But the ugly really comes out of the few, and the few are the ones that get the most attention on there, right? I mean, there's a very small minority of people who grab onto this. I call them grievance grifters, outrage entrepreneurs, but they get the most. I mean, their stuff goes viral more often. They're playing on people's emotions, and people's emotions get them to engage. So as a Christian, talk about the idea, because it's something that's so dear to me. Talk about one's ability to try to stay rational, and instead of latching on to those ugly moments when we're so emotionally charged. This is something Jonathan Haidt talks about in the coddling of the American mind as well. Being able to make good decisions, or even try to be rational in times of irrationality, right? Our worst moments are when we're emotionally charged, and that's when most people are starting to engage. So talk about that for me.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point that you make and that he makes. And there's something that unlocks in us when we are in the heat of an argument, and it's a little bit easier to do because we're doing it online, and there is a kind of adrenaline rush when you feel like you're right and you have a great point to make. And I've talked a lot about Christians and the way that we interact with each other and interact even with people who disagree with us. The Bible has a lot to say about the shape of our words, believe it or not. And not just, we believe as Christians that God doesn't just care about what we say and what we stand up for, but how we say it, right? I think of Peter, 1 Peter 3:15, where he says, have an answer for every person for the hope that lies within you. And so he's saying, have the courage to speak out and say the things that are true, to answer the deep questions of the age. Christians shouldn't shy away from that. We should be involved in the conversations that our culture is having. We shouldn't withdraw from those. But then he says, but do it with gentleness and kindness. And so it's this idea that civility and courage can go together, that you could make strong, firm, principled arguments without denigrating the person you're disagreeing with. And I really think we have to just weigh, our words and understand, even when we're doing this online, that we're doing it in public. I think sometimes we forget that I'm in public, people are watching me, and what am I saying? How am I representing Christ in the world? I really I really think we also need to ask ourselves, and I do this from time to time, this person I'm engaging with, are we having a good faith conversation? Or as you said, is this person a conflict entrepreneur or um, a fear merchant or whatever? And those people exist. There's a lot of incentive, as you know, the algorithms reward it.
Yes.
If you,
Yep.
and I've come to find out that a lot of folks that are the most combative that way online, really, they believe what they say, but they're actually, sometimes they actually don't. They have to gin up attention. And, sometimes in wanting to refute someone like that, you feel righteous because you're right, but you're actually giving that person what they want. You're giving them attention,
It's
clicks.
exactly what they want. It's
Yeah,
they're looking for the clicks. They're looking for the
yeah,
attention. They know their tweet or whatever a tweet is called now. I'm not really sure,
yeah,
but
yeah,
whatever it is designed to again, this is something that Jonathan Roush and I talked about. It's designed to get you to engage.
absolutely.
You are not going to allow somebody to denigrate you or say horrible things about you that
Yeah,
you are not true. And even if you have the will to stay out of that battle, so to speak, there is probably going to be people that stick up for you. I know this because there were people that said horrible things about me in this recent video that went viral with
right, right.
Dr. Francis Collins. And then that I wasn't even going to engage it, because I'm like, I'm not going to give this person my attention. But then there was other people that glommed onto it and attacked
Yeah,
that person, and I'm like, oh no. But I mean, because I mean, I know what that is for,
yeah.
and I've seen that, and I'm not gonna lie, there have been times when back in the day when I did stuff like that, and
Oh, same
and
here. I really think, yeah, I mean, I'm more and more I'm saying, okay, if I interact with this person, are they in a or is this a good faith conversation? Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's okay, I read what you said. Here's some questions or here's some things I disagree. And you can have a good faith back and forth and end it by saying, hey, you raised some. What I try to do is end it by saying, you raised some good points. We probably disagree on this. Or is this someone who is always in bad faith? And, you can't argue with them. The other thing I think we have to ask ourselves is this. I've been saying this more and more. Well, I have a lot of opinions about a lot of things. I don't know that they all need to be public.
that's right.
And
That is
I
so
don't know.
right.
So I have a lot of opinions. And sometimes I'm about to tweet this or say this. And I'd like, you know, I still believe this, but if I do this, what good is this going to do? Number one. And number two, I don't know if you do this. Sometimes I'm scrolling through social media and I'm like, here's a conversation or an argument that I have an opinion about. I'm not going to get involved here.
Right.
Like I'm going to leave this alone. So I just think we have to have that discernment, but it does matter how we say things. I think sometimes Christians think, well, as long as I'm on the right side, it doesn't matter how I say it.
That's right.
Um, but that's not really true. I mean, the apostles, Peter and Paul, who were bold and courageous, who lost their lives for the standing up for the truth of the gospel,
Yep. Yep.
they actually, nevertheless, they said, hey, the way you carry yourself matters. When Paul's talking about church leaders and he's talking about the qualifications for church leaders, among those are, self-controlled, gentle, not a brawler, not someone who's quarrelsome. These are marks of maturity, of Christian maturity. And so I think we need to try to embody those. And we can do that well while also having very strong opinions and not backing down from what we believe.
That's absolutely right. There's a couple things that you said in this past couple minutes, Dan, that I want to key on, and I really want to stress the importance of. And the first one is that we can disagree, and we can disagree vehemently
Mhm.
on different things, and I think it's important that we do. I've made that statement plenty of times. But the way that we engage, the way that we say things, the way that we talk to the person that we disagree with can make or break that conversation. It can completely derail and make sure that that person never hears anything that you're saying, or it can actually be a good faith conversation just because we talk about civility and the idea that we have to engage in civil conversation, but be able to stand up and freely, fully, and fearlessly speak our mind. that's not some kind of milk toast middle. And I think a lot of people get mistaken
Right.
on that is, oh, well, you guys are just looking for middle ground, compromise, and you can't stick to your convictions. So that was the one. And then the other thing that you said there, and it made me laugh, and is not everything I think needs to be made public. Not everything I
Right.
see online needs a reaction, right? So I
Right.
will tell you, and this is me personally now, not how I used to be, but this is me now, is I will scroll through and I will look at things and I will type up a response to it and I will delete it. Not
Same.
sending it out because, and I do that far, far more, and this is probably why I don't have a very big social media following, but it is one of those things where I'm like, I want to respond to this so bad, and I start to type a response to it, and then I'm like, I definitely don't need this response going public, so I just delete it, and it's I do that far more than I actually
Y-
engage online these days, Dan, and it's just funny,
Yeah.
but it's so true.
I do the same thing. And I used to be more reactive too. And I do the same. I'll type up stuff and then I'm like, no, I'm not going to do this. Or what I'll do is I'll type it up and I'll schedule it. And then a couple hours later, I'm like, do I really want to tweet that? Let me go back and delete that. Like I feel the same way. And, you said something too. We can be convictional and strong in what we believe and also be charitable and see the people who disagree with us as human beings. Um, and I think we have to decide too, what are the things that we're going to stand up for and not budge on? And I
Hmm.
talk a
Hmm.
little bit about that in my book. And what are the things that we're going to be open-handed and say, okay, we can work together on this, right? I think of, policy issues and things in politics. Like, I think everybody across the spectrum, here's a good example. Everybody across the spectrum, political spectrum, understands that, as a country, we should take care of the poor. But people are going to come at different ways of what's the best way to lift people out of poverty. Now, as a
Right.
conservative, I think, giving people opportunity and, creating opportunities for them to work and do all that. Other people are going to have different views. We can probably compromise on where that line should be between government. There's things like that or other issues. Then there's other issues that we're going to say, I cannot budge on this, but we can still be um, friends and talk to people. One thing I really like about what you're doing, and I loved about Braver Angels is putting people together in conversation who not just left right, because I don't think the divides are always left right anymore,
They're
but
not always, no.
they're more like we have these class divisions, and I think putting people together for me it's been instructive as someone who has worked in the so-called knowledge economy, writing and speaking. And I don't think of myself as elite by any stretch. I mean, I shop at Sam's Club and Aldi and Walmart for heaven's sakes, like we're trying to, but I'm in that sort of world of thinkers and writers and influencers. And sometimes I'm not as in touch with people who are doing more blue collar work.
Yep.
And there's that divide. I think COVID really opened that divide. And Brave Angels putting people together to say, here's, Francis Collins, who is one of the world's renowned scientists, and he's in the East Coast and he's working for the government. And here's someone who is a blue collar worker who's like an everyday American, and their world seems so apart. How do we put them together? And I think that's one thing that needs to happen even more than the left right is to say, if you work in this world, you should try to step into the world of someone else and empathize and see, okay, this is what they're thinking, and this is, from their perspective.
No, that's absolutely right, Dan. The big thing that I'm going to try and focus more on this year. I obviously with Braver Angels, one of my things that I do the most with Braver Angels is my We the People's Project stuff. It started out as the Working People's Project, but then we kind of morphed that name into the We the People's Project because I do believe that the working class Americans, rural Americans, and you talk about that class divide, right? The haves and the
Hmm.
have-nots, the people that are in that intellectual intelligentsia bubble, and then everybody else, right? Um,
Hmm.
they don't interact enough.
Right.
And when it comes to the COVID divide and the things that we saw, my friend Dr. Jay Bhattacharya talks about a lot of the things that happened to the everybody that's outside of that laptop class, right? There's so many people that were affected outside of that laptop class, the people that were considered essential workers, and I cannot stand that term, but essential workers, and they're having to go to work every single day, or the even worse part about that, the things that we had to think about was those that weren't considered essential workers, and their job was stripped from them, and now they're having to go home, and now they're just basically asking for can I get a little money from the government, please, so that my kids don't starve? Um,
Right.
that thing made me, you know, obviously that made me and a whole lot of other people very, very angry. But yeah, that divide of classes, the
Yeah.
laptop class versus the blue collar working class.
Absolutely.
We need to do more work, and I'm actually doing a lot of work right now. Well, I don't know if I would call it a lot, but I'm doing work, obviously, still in conjunction a bit with my Braver Angels, colleagues, but Harry Boyd here in the state of Minnesota is doing stuff, and we're working. I've got a thing. It'll probably come out, or it'll happen a couple weeks before this episode actually airs. But I'm going to be talking at his St. Matthew's Episcopal Church down in St. Paul. And me being more of a rural guy, right? Rural urban, or that rural urban divide is something that I think Christianity and Harry specifically, is using the nonviolence teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King, and then the Christianity, the church using that as a bonding agent for bridging the divide between the rural and the urban, and it's it's such important work, but it's something I'm going to be keen on a lot more this year, Dan, is really trying to get more speaking engagements, trying to interact more with people more like me outside. Well,
Mhm.
I do spend most of my time in an office nowadays, just full disclosure, but for the majority of my life,
Yeah.
I was either driving a truck or swinging a hammer or working in kitchens and stuff. Very, very blue collar for
Yeah.
for the vast majority of my life. That divide there, that haves and have nots, that
It's
rural
huge.
urban, that intelligentsia laptop class, and the blue collar swinging a hammer, holding the steering wheel class. Those things need a bridge. They need a bridge
Absolutely.
because right now not enough people understand the other side, and that divide is caused by the misunderstanding and the inability for those two worlds to collide. So that's the divide that I'm going to be focusing a lot of my attention on in the coming year, Dan.
Yeah, I love that. I first started to see it. I think COVID exacerbated that.
It
And
absolutely did.
but I think I first started to see it with the rise of Trump. And however people feel about Trump, if you love him or hate him, set that aside. Um, when he first ran, I've been following politics my whole life. I've
Hmm.
been a Republican, conservative Republican my whole life. Um, when he first ran, I was, of course, like, didn't like what he was saying. I'm more traditional Republican. I first thought, there's no way this guy's going to win. He puts on that hat, comes down the whatever, and I missed it. I had I talk about this in my book, but my brother-in-law, who's a great guy, just we're really close, and he's very blue collar, and it's funny, he voted for Obama twice, and I've voted for Republicans my whole life, but he voted for Obama twice. He's very blue collar. He told me in the primary, I actually owed him two steak dinners because in the primary, he goes, "This guy's going to win." I said, "There's no way. I've been watching this my whole life. There's no way. Guys like that come and rise and fall. He's doing everything wrong. He's whatever." Sure enough, he wins, and I owe him a steak dinner. And then I said, "I don't want Hillary to win by any stretch, but there's no way he's going to win. He's going to get crushed." Then he wins. So I owe him two steak dinners. But what I missed, after 16, I started to think about this. Um, Every blue collar worker I've ever met since 2016, Will, everyone in every city since 2016, they love the guy. And I'm not just talking about white people in the South. I'm talking Uber drivers and busboys and wait staff in places like New York and Washington, D.C. And I don't bring up politics.
Right.
They bring
Right.
it up. And so what I realized was he tapped into there's a whole group of people who have felt left behind and
That's
have
right.
felt like
That's right. That's a
this has all left them behind. And, I've never felt elite. I've worked in, as a pastor, and then I was in executive leadership for the Southern Baptist Convention. But I've always been sort of in these sort of green rooms and speaking and writing and laptop world, and I just didn't see this. And he did, he tapped into that. And then of course, and I've never felt elite. My dad's a retired plumber, and I spent my high school years working on construction sites and all that stuff. So I'm not that far removed from it, but there's this huge divide. And then COVID really exacerbated, and that's where I really started to get a little bit upset with, on COVID, I was always in the middle, right? I knew it was a serious thing that people were getting it and dying. We had friends die from COVID, close friends. I never liked the shutdowns. I thought the shutdowns were bad, but I also didn't think it's nothing and we can just, whatever, lick doorknobs for, and whatever. So I was always in the middle, but I always was really upset about the closures.
yes.
And especially in the early parts of the pandemic. And I think we had to do some of that, something like this big stadium events and all. But I remember thinking in my mind, people were so flippant, Wilk, about shut it all down. And I'm thinking, yeah, you and I could work from home till Jesus comes. But what about the people whose living depends on that? Even
That's right.
shutting down ball games. Oh, ball games, we don't need them. People were sports writers and were like, shut it all down. I'm like, there's guys who work at the stadium selling popcorn
Yeah. What
who are
about
not going to have a job, or the small businesses, and people were so flippant. It made me so upset. And I think that is really the seeds of some of the divide. And, looking back, I think now where we're at is people are venting their anger and saying, you really destroyed our lives. And so I think putting that divide together, Wilk, of people from different walks of life and different stations and talking, and as a Christian, I think the church is one place where we can do that, right? Where in my small group, it could be me who teaches and works in the academy and writes, but I have someone who is whether it's an HVAC worker or a plumber or a truck driver, and we have different vocations and maybe see the world a little bit differently, but we have the shared faith, and I think we need more of that, Will. To see you and Francis Collins on the stage together having a conversation was bridging so many different worlds.
right?
And however people feel about that conversation, Dr. Collins, whatever, that kind of conversation needs to happen more, where we have, where people in my world aren't looking at people in the blue collar world and say, man, these guys don't know anything or whatever, this elitism that is so thick. But then the other point saying, I'm in the blue collar world and I thought this guy was this out of touch elitist. And I talked to him and thought, oh, maybe we have more in common. So I think that's so important. Don't you think?
Oh, I absolutely think it's important. And that's the thing about the conversation. And that's what it all keeps on coming back to, the conversation, right? We've got
Yeah.
to have the conversation because so many people don't know what they don't know. And they can't know what they don't know if they don't have that conversation. There are so many people that are so quick to judge others, and this is one of the stains that I think a lot of people talk about when it comes to Christianity, is the judgment side of it, right? The people who judge without actually knowing. Walk a mile in my shoes, or before you start to try and judge who I am and what I believe. But that's the thing, is without having the conversation. If people just turn up their nose, I don't care whether you're I've known blue collar elitists and I've known laptop class elitists, or these intellectuals and people like your dad from that plumber class, right? I've known both sides that are quick to turn up their nose and say, well, I'm not going to talk to that person because of whatever, right? I've known people on both sides of the religious divide, Christians and non-Christians. I'm not going to waste my time talking to this person. But what they're doing is they're robbing themselves, Dan, of an opportunity to learn who this person is. It's not a guarantee. Every conversation, no conversation is ever going to be a guarantee that I'm going to come out the other side having you as a best friend. But there is a guarantee that if you don't have the conversation, you will never know. And if people don't start to realize that these divides that we have, there is a concerted effort on plenty, Dan, in this world to keep people divided. And the most sured way to see that happen is to make sure those people do not talk to each other. That is the biggest problem and the thing that disgusts me most about politics and what
Mhm.
happens in our media and with our politicians today is because they try to instill hatred in groups for other groups. And if they can
Mm.
do it, they know that they will impede the people's desire to have conversations. And in doing so, again, that is the one sure way to guarantee that that divide either stays divided or even gets worse, is to make sure people aren't talking to each other. Now,
Absolutely.
going to this conversation with me and Dr. Francis Collins, I never would have expected a guy like me could end up where I am in this whole COVID divide, right? It's been certainly one of the honors of my lifetime, but now I see it as one of the most important things that I've ever done in my life because I do see this as being one of those things that divided this country more than probably anything in my lifetime. And I think rightfully so, because you talked about it in what you were saying, in that there were so many people that just had no idea. They were completely blind to, how these different things were going to affect other people in worlds outside of their own. They had no idea. I mean, it's just like, right away, the idea, I spend a lot of my time or my adult life in a truck, Dan, driving truck over the road and things like
Mhm.
that, and what we depended on as truck drivers is a
Yes.
the one sense of normalcy that we had outside of sitting behind a steering wheel for 14 hours a day is just having a truck stop, a place where we could go sit down, have a cup of coffee, just kind of decompress for a little while, and just get out of that truck. Those truck drivers were robbed of that, at the beginning of the pandemic, because it's like they shut down all the truck stops. You couldn't go in and sit down in a restaurant. Well, so now instead of instead of having that place to decompress and get out and actually see somebody else in real life, now these people are spending 24 hours a day with no reprieve inside a small box on wheels. And those semis might look big, but take it from somebody who's spent months on end running around in those trucks, well, years on end, but months at a time without going home, that gets very, very small very, very quickly. And then you talk about the guy at the stadium that's, selling popcorn, or the people at the bars that are surrounding these stadiums, selling beers and depending on the tailgaters and all the other things that come around with sports. People think of sports and they think about those, I know you're a huge sports fan because I see,
Huge.
your Twitter feed. A lot of times people don't realize what all goes into that, right? There's there's the 70,000 people in the stadium. It's not just the 53 men on either side of that sideline, to go to a football reference, but you've got the coaching staff, and then you've got the medical staff, and then you've got the people that clean the stadiums, and you've got the people, and that's just and that's just a small segment of what's inside the stadium. But what's outside the stadium, now you've got all the tailgaters and everything that goes into the tailgating, and the bars and the restaurants and everything else. How many bars and restaurants businesses were decimated in 2020, 2021, 2022 because they shut down those things, and even after they brought back the sports, okay, now we got but the tailgating. And so I mean I could go on forever about these things, but the reality is this. Going back to how these worlds don't collide, and how they really need to, and how we need to understand our neighbors, right? There's so many people nowadays that they just don't have the conversation anymore. They aren't really getting together with, and really learning from people they don't know, and they don't understand, and they just don't know what they don't know. And in doing so, that ignorance, and I don't mean ignorance in a bad way, it's just like I said, they don't know what they don't know. And in not knowing, they make assumptions of, well, the pandemic wasn't so bad for me. I just worked from home and got my stuff done
Yeah.
and got my paychecks, and I was golden. But for a lot of people, the truck drivers and the and
Oh,
the
yeah.
and the
I
wait
mean,
staff, it was an entirely different thing.
I agree. And, you know, people who work in the knowledge economy, and we need people like that. We need, like, our world needs to exist, but it depends on people who don't. And
Right.
that's the thing I don't think people
That's
understood.
exactly
Like,
right.
all those Amazon deliveries, how do you think those got from warehouse to warehouse and got to your house? And I tell my kids this about truck drivers. I'll say, the kids, everything you see on the shelf at Walmart got there from a truck.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
the truck drivers can't do their jobs, the whole country comes to a standstill.
That's right.
So I really appreciate that. And I think, one of it is just about understanding each other and saying, whatever world you're in, to say, I live in I live in this laptop world, but I'm trying to understand people who don't, or vice versa, to say I live in the
Hmm.
blue collar world and I thought all those people were elitist jerks. And actually I met a few and they're actually not. So,
Right.
that kind of thing I think is really important for us. And the media wants to widen the class divide, and they want to widen these because there's a lot of financial incentives. I mean, I've said this for years, but the media companies act like they are there to oppose Trump. He's a threat to democracy. They love this guy. They want him to be president because
Oh, he's
he
their
makes
bread and butter. I mean, they
he
give
makes them a
him, or
lot of
he gives
money.
them so much material.
Oh yeah, and I think he knows that.
Yeah.
Um, and so I just think we have to resist that and say,
Hmm.
I'm not going to be. I People might be fighting and people might be having these class divides. You don't have to sign up for that. You don't
That's
have to
right.
be part of that. You can say, I'm going to conduct and live myself differently. I'm going to be someone who tries to build bridges. And what I see, Will, and you probably see this too, is away from the internet, away from the national conversations, when I'm actually in communities, whether I'm
Hmm.
speaking at
Hmm.
churches or different places around the country, people are doing this.
Yes, they
People are
are.
getting
They
along with
are.
their neighbors.
We're not
They're getting
nearly as
along with their
divided.
neighbors. They're they're getting along with their neighbors. They're getting along with people who disagree with them. People are more complicated than we think in terms of these binaries, in terms of their politics and all this stuff. And so I do think when we get away from the noise and we get in our actual communities, people are actually doing this.
That's right.
I'm,
That's right.
A lot of people are pessimistic about the country. A lot of people, oh, we're headed for civil war. We're headed for this. I think we have deep issues and problems that we've got to solve. But I'm hopeful about the country. I think, we'll have times of renewal. We'll have times of these things. But maybe I'm a little bit too Pollyanna. Who knows?
You know what? Optimism is good, and
Yeah.
I've had a few different people say, talk me off the ledge, Wilk, because I can't see the good in what's going on, and I don't know how we get through it. And the reality is this, Dan, and I will say this over and over and over again. With groups like Braver Angels, and people like Daniel Darling, and podcasts like the D-Rate the Hate podcast, not to give myself my own plug, but the reality is there are a lot of people. There's always going to be people, like I said, putting forth that concerted effort to keep us divided. But there are those of us who are working so hard to bridge those divides, to bring people to the conversation, and we just got to keep on focusing on that. And then really, the same thing that I've said over and over and over again with this podcast, Dan, is bettering the world one attitude at a time. We can't control everything that happens to us or around us, but we can control how we react to it. And as individuals, if we consciously be the person or be the change that we want to see in the world, that stuff is contagious. So, Dan,
That's right.
this conversation could go on for hours and hours, and I'm definitely looking forward to more conversations with you. But I know we're getting close to the end of our time today. I am so thankful for you, man. Grateful for the work that you're doing. I encourage everybody to, check out DanielDarling.com. Is there anything you want to leave the DTH listeners with, Dan, today, or any words? I know you got a lot of words of wisdom, but what's your best parting words for our listeners today?
Well, I would just say that, you can't change the world. You can't change a lot of things that's out there, but what we can do is do good in the areas that we have control over, and build bridges and those things where we can. And if more people do that, I think the country will experience that sort of renewal, and I think our communities will be better. And you can check out my book, Agents of Grace. You get it wherever books are sold. Love this conversation, Wilk. This has been fun, and really love the work you're doing.
Thank you so much, Daniel Darling. I appreciate your time today and look forward to you coming back.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the D-Rate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.